some people who registered if they're running a couple minutes late. But yeah, for those, I'm Steve Narish, as Regional Director here with Crexi, talking to you from West Los Angeles and Marina Del Rey. We also have Matt Kors, my co-host, Regional Director as well. This is part of our weekly Pro Perspective webinar series to give you, an insider's guide to commercial real estate topics. So today's topic will be the 2020 impact on real estate and brokerage. We have these running every Wednesday. So if you have any interest in other topics, these are a weekly reoccurrence. We're very excited to have Mike Spears, who's managing principal at Lee & Associates Houston. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Mike over the last few years. I can confidently say that he's an awesome broker, but even a better person. So we'll get into some of that. I was having lunch in his office, I would say before the pandemic hit, and I learned, his efforts during the Hurricane Harvey, crisis and hurricane that hit. So we'll get you to know a little bit more about Mike, but yeah, today's topic is the 2020 impact on commercial real estate and brokerage. I'm going to kick it over to my sidekick, Matt Kors, in case the tire goes flat or we lose some wheels. I've worked with Matt for quite some time, so sometimes I think he'll purposely leave that tire flat, but no, he's here to make sure that everything works appropriately logistically. So I'll let Matt introduce himself, and then we'll provide a background on Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Steve and Mike. So yeah, basically all I'm here to do today is the Q&A and the chat feature. So if there's any questions that are coming in from a logistics standpoint, you all will see a Q&A box and a chat box at the bottom of the screen. If you hit the Q&A box, it's going to kind of ping us and let us know. And we're going to try to answer those in as close to real time as possible that we can. And there's a chat box too. We'll get to both of them, but if you can use the Q&A box, that'd be great. And then the only other thing I would say is we are going to do a poll at the end, which is more like a survey. And we have a segment of the week this week, which is going to be on the price of oil, what we all think that looks like 12 months from now, since Mike's joining us from Houston, and we'll launch that in a few minutes here.
Yeah, so why don't we go over just a brief background on Mike Spears. Again, he's managing principal for Lee & Associates in Houston. He has a 20-plus year career so far. He manages over 40-plus people, including brokers and staff in Houston. He has a vast experience in management. He has encompassed more than $1 billion in transactions over the course of his career. Prior to heading to Lee & Associates, Mike spent about 15 years at the National Retail Group. He served as the president for 7 years, and he's involved in about over 700 different transactions, responsible for almost $600 million in annual transactions. He's also an active member of SIOR. He holds the CCIM designation and also an active member of NAIOP. Lastly, what I thought was pretty cool, and this is something I just recently found out about Mike, he is the founder and serves as the president of Compassionate Lee, which is a foundation established by Lee & Associates to kind of give back to the community and help those in need. So without further ado, thanks Mike for joining the call. Matt and I are very excited to have you speak to the audience today. Thanks for coming in, Mike.
I think you're muted, Mike.
You're muted.
Oh, shoot.
There we go.
Yeah, is that good?
Yep, loud and clear.
Weird. I didn't have to do anything. It just popped in. Well, thank you guys for having me. I always love doing these calls and really hearing other opinions and, really getting to do it. You guys do a great job, and I really appreciate what y'all do. So it's an honor to be here today.
Thanks, Mike. Well, why don't we go ahead? Matt, did you want to start off with the poll?
Yeah, let's launch this poll. So for our segment of the week, I figured, Mike coming from Houston, oil prices today, from what I saw online, about $37.98 a barrel. What will that look like 12 months from now? Do we think higher, lower, or the same? And any opinion on from your end, Mike, before people want to answer?
As far as what I think it'll be, I think
it's
anybody's guess, right? It's quite frankly, I don't think, or at least I didn't know, and I know a lot of people that even in the oil business didn't know that oil could go negative until about a month ago when it went negative. So it's going to be hard to tell. I think people are, as we come out of our quarantines and start reopening, obviously there's going to be a higher demand, but the question really is going to be how high is that demand, and is it going to be enough to get out, kind of remove the glut of oil that's in storage. And as you guys know what caused that, or if you don't know that, there was the storage capacity was full, and when that happens, it shuts everything down. So I think you're going to see some. I think it's got a chance to probably go up a bit. We hope it does, at least in Houston we do. And as a lot of these wells are getting capped, which means they're shutting the production down. And as that happens, demand goes up, or obviously if demand goes up as well, people start operating normal or at least close to normal again. It should help get rid of some of what's there. And then of course there's the wild cards, which is the Saudis and the Russians and what they had to deal with, and hopefully they can get a handle on that and stop flooding the market with oil. So a lot of things have to happen for that oil to go up, but I do think it's stabilized a bit. So
awesome. Well, we'll come with those results next week on the show for anyone who answered, but thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So let's start with our first topic today, which is just management. And I know that we were talking a few weeks ago, and you mentioned to me that in your 42 years of existence, this one feels like it's the craziest. And obviously, living in Houston, you've dealt with Hurricane Ike, Harvey, the 08 recession, and now we're dealing with another curveball that I think it's safe to say none of us have ever had to deal with before. So I would just ask, we're always looking for advice, especially during these current times, and based on your prior experience, both with TNRG and now with Lean Associates, how have your prior experience dealing with crisis and just maybe life-changing events or economic crises helped you with managing the current situation today?
I think that it's helped me in the sense that you kind of start realizing that there's going to be unknowns, and that it really emphasizes the importance of communicating and communicating. I mean, you got to keep everybody up to speed on what's happening and where the company sits, how you're doing, how they're doing. I think it becomes all the more important. It's always important to communicate, right? But in a situation like this where there's uncertainty, where people are concerned and even scared in some cases, where a lot of times I think it's more frightening when it's uncertain and when you don't know what's going to happen than it is when you know what's happening. So trying to get at least provide some kind of a calming effect where you just communicate with them, let them know that you're there. And I know when I talk about that and really put it in perspective of maybe when you manage especially younger people that are fairly new, that have not been through one of these before. I know in the past what we would do is you increase the number of training sessions and meetings that you have with them, where you get everybody into the conference room and really have them just make sure they're doing okay. I think it can have there's a psychological effect that occurs that, unfortunately can really impact your productivity and overall success. And on the other hand, I mean, if it's interesting because if you do it right and you really get focused and I say stay positive, but you have to be real, but if you stay focused and really attack the situation, you can actually, especially if you're a younger broker, you can really advance your career quite a bit and do it in a pretty short time period. But it's really it's one of those where it really everything hangs in the balance. This one's been a completely different deal than any of the previous downturns that we've dealt with, because we couldn't get in the conference room. We had to go home. So I know we started doing these online video chats, and I thought it was important to use the video versus just doing a phone call, because I wanted to see them and make sure they saw me. And it's something that you want to make sure, and you can tell a lot by just how someone, their demeanor, right? So, I mean, it's been a different one. It's I think previous experience. It's you finally learn that at the end of the day, it's if you stick it out and you just learn to deal with it. you'll get through it. And I liken it to, I don't know how many people on the line go snow skiing, okay? But I really compare this to like when you go snow skiing, right? And I like to say I'm not an expert. I'm not one of these people that jumps out of a helicopter and goes down these crazy mountains. But I'm a pretty, I'd say, upper intermediate. I'll ski down, blacks every now and then. I try to avoid the moguls, but I can deal with them. They're okay. I mean, I try not to do them all the time. I'm not like itching to, but inevitably, when you're going skiing and you're with a group, there's somebody in the group, right, that says, "Hey guys, follow me. I know a good trail," and everybody follows him. And then he takes a left when he should have taken a right. And there, everybody skis up right to one spot, and there you are. Everybody's staring down at a double black, or a double black diamond. And everybody's mad at Bob now, and we're like, "Bob, come on, man!" And he's like, "Sorry, I took a wrong turn." And it's just one of those things. But what happens in that time is everybody really, really fast. It happens really fast. Everybody comes to the realization that standing here complaining about it is not getting us down this mountain any faster. And you're going to have to ski that slope. It's not going to be easy. Some people have to, you take your wide turns and you take it slow and you do it at your pace and you get down that mountain. Some people even have to take the skis off and go down on the rear end. Whatever you have to do, there's a slope that has to be skied, no matter how difficult, how scary it may be, but you got to do it. And the only way to get down that mountain is to ski that slope. Well, that's where we're at right now. We're looking down that slope. Nobody wants to ski this. Trust me, nobody was looking forward to this, but we're here and we're skiing it. And we're going to get to the bottom, and you just have to come to that conclusion, or you have to accept that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a certain level of pain that goes with it. But if you stay focused, you take it at what you can, you take it at your pace, you will get to the bottom of it. And when you get to the bottom, you're going to have a story to tell, I tell you that. And every downturn or every difficult time and period that you run into moving forward, it's going to seem a little bit less challenging and a little bit less intimidating. And I think this one's a particularly bad one because of the uncertainty, because not only did we have an economic situation, which has been, unparalleled, but we have this scary virus thing running around. And it's not only impacted the economics and the financial situation, it's impacted our culture. I mean, think about it, guys. I mean, where are all the hugs and the handshakes these days? They're gone. What happened to that? And it's because we're worried about this thing. So at the end of the day, like I said, I compared, hopefully most of you understand the comparison, is that ski slope. We're going to have to do this. We stay focused. We'll get to the bottom, guys. And once we get to the bottom, we're going to be that much better. We're going to be that much stronger. I think there's a real opportunity to really learn your trade, to become better at what you do. Oftentimes, if you find a silver lining, it's that you do it out of necessity. You're forced to learn how to use technologies. I mean, I'm over here pushing buttons and muting it and all that kind of stuff. But you think about it, I mean, I didn't really use video conferencing that often prior to all this. I was more of a let's get in person and meet in person. This has been the next best thing. And I think just the use of this learning programs like Crexi. I mean, I'll tell you, you guys know I've been a big proponent of the system, and I think you guys do a phenomenal job. And the problem you run into is a lot of times brokers, they get real busy. So this shiny new software comes out, or this new subscription service, and they use it, but they don't really take the time to use it because they're too busy doing other things. So they may learn to do one or two different features on it. Well, this has given us the time to really go in and learn that program, because man, you learn Crexi, for example, it'll make you a better broker, and you're going to be that much more efficient and be able to provide that much better service to your client once you can do that. And so again, silver lining being there's an opportunity for all of us to really get in there and do the online training sessions, call you guys up, show me how to do this, show me how to do that. And so I think that, when it's said and done, those that take the right approach and ski the slope are going to end up better at their professions when we're all done.
Yeah, no, I think it's valuable feedback. I mean, I know that communication is one of the things that we harp on probably the most, which you mentioned, like even when we're sitting someone right across, the hallway where we can go in and open their door and talk to them, and they're only 10 feet apart. We talk about, how critical communication is, but even more importantly now than ever, it's all about relationships and with your people and your clients within your own workforce. So, that would kind of lead into, and you're mentioning like shaking hands, like you do in property tours. You're meeting with people who are coming out to see a property. Even people are a little bit hesitant to actually shake their hands. You can see that was kind of registering within their head. But advice for young brokers that are coming into the industry. This is obviously a different environment for people who like to start their brokerage career, and just like we're facing here at Crexi in our environment. But do you have any advice? And I think that we touched upon the topic of now getting an opportunity for them to talk to clients more. But what kind of advice do you have for people fresh in the
First
industry?
and foremost, seize the moment, guys. I mean, when you got into this business, I mean, as a new broker, a lot of people that, anybody that's gotten into business knows this, is it's not easy. I don't care how good the market is or how bad it is. At the end of the day, it is tough to start off in this business, and you really it's a grind. You've got to get in there, and there's a long period, or it seems a lot longer. Actually, it really is, that it's just hard to break out and to get there. I mean, you think about it, you may be prospecting and you're cold calling people, and you call a person, they tell you they have 3 years left on their lease. There's not a lot you're going to do for them right then. But the beauty of it is, in 2.5 years or 2 years, you got a totally different phone call to make. Now they have to make a decision, right? But when I say seize the moment too, what I think in these downturns that we've seen in the past, in your super brokers, okay, or let me back up. I would say getting into the business over the last 5 years has been an extremely difficult task, because what's happened is we've just finished up. COVID put the end to what was the longest period of economic growth in American history, by a lot, by the way, by over a year. Okay, I think it was 127 months, 128 months of straight growth. I think previous time period it was somewhere in the 110, 112 months. I mean, so it's been a lot longer than your normal growth periods, where that's a cool thing for those of us that are more veteran or been in the business longer. As a new broker, it's almost like trying to board a moving train, which, as you can imagine, is not an easy task. You got to run really, really fast, and you miss, and you got to start over, and you keep on trying to jump on the train, you can't get on. And the reason I say that is because I do all these comparisons and metaphors and whatnot, but it's because these owners of these businesses, these managers, and the people that make the decisions, especially with the real estate, they've been busy too. When the market's good, they're busy, and they haven't had time to cultivate a relationship with a new person. They don't have time to listen to this person. No matter how good ideas this person may have, they don't listen to them. So what's happened is they go to the default broker. They go to the person, super broker Bob over there, that their predecessor used, and because they didn't have time to go out and interview and get to know someone else, or really learn what other people have to offer, they've just gone kind of, who's the last guy we dealt with, and that's who they go to. And but the train, ladies and gentlemen, has come to a halt. Okay, it's time to get on board, and now they have that time. And so, by all means, I'm not going to tell you it's going to come without a certain level of pain and a certain level of difficulty, a significant difficulty. But if you stay focused and you look at this as an opportunity to actually get in and cultivate those relationships. I mean, another comparison, if you will, I mean, in martial arts, when you think about it, when people take it to another level, they give them another belt, right? You go from like a white belt to a blue belt to a red belt. And I may be getting these wrong for all those of you that are in martial arts. I'm just giving an example, but I really think there's an opportunity here to jump ahead 3 belts or 4 belts and skip them. I mean, again, the martial arts, it may take you a year or 2 years to jump a belt. Equivalent in our industry, I really think you can advance your career if you do this right and you take the right attitude. You can advance your career 3 or 4 or 5 years. Meaning, if we just stayed in the good old days of 4 or 5 months ago, it could have taken you 3 or 4 or 5 years to accomplish what you can actually accomplish today in a very short period of time by just staying focused, staying positive, becoming useful, be educated, get informed, learn about the oil prices. Why did oil go negative? You need to understand that. Get in there and understand that, I go back, a couple of months ago when the PPP loan was being talked about. That was an opportunity. Get in there and really read up on that thing and become educated there when you're talking to these people that you're calling, to be able to offer some advice. Let's face it, especially a few months ago, it's kind of getting a little easier now, but a few months ago, trying to call somebody and sell them something would have been tacky. People are looking at you going, why in the world would you want me to even think about doing something right now? I'm trying to keep my office alive, right? And yet, there were other ways for you to get in. They still have time to talk to you. And if you were able to provide advice, be able to understand and be informed about what's out there, what's going on, try to understand their industry, you really, that's kind of that start where you start building that relationship. Because I'll tell you, with all the social media and all the cool technologies and everything that's out there today, the brokerage world has changed dramatically since I got into business. I believe it or not, we were actually using a fax machine often when I got into business. I know I'm not feel that old, but it's true. I was thinking about it, and I'm like, it dawned on me the other day. Somebody actually asked about that, and I said, I don't even know if we have a fax machine. I really don't. I think it's been 7, 8 years, 10 years even since I sent a fax. But that's what it was back then. Things have advanced so fast. But there's one thing about this business that will not change, that I think is going to always be the case. It's the concept and the notion of the relationship. And people are going to, I don't care how smart that system is, how cool Crexi becomes or anybody else, they're going to want to do business with people that they know and that they like. And they're going to go with that relationship. And it's always going to be the case. I don't think that ever changes. And take that time. And the way you build that relationship is you need to become useful and become helpful. And it may not mean, unfortunately, it may not mean getting a paycheck today or getting a lease done or a sale done, but because you were there on the phone and were able to give this person a piece of advice or tell them where to get a certain kind of information or whatever, and because you became better at using the resources that you had available, which there's a lot of them, you were more effective. And that's your opportunity to really, I say impress, but also just get in there and really have someone that say, okay, we're going to call this person because they were helpful. One, they kind of feel like they may owe you one, but then two, it's also they know you're a good resource and you're there, that you're a person that's going to make things happen and be able to get them the answers that they want. So again, I'd say take this head on,
we had a question hop in here too, Mike. I think from probably a junior broker, a young broker here, just advice on like product specialization. Which I think is probably, with what's going on now, retail's obviously been a hot button for a while. And I know you're on the industrial side, right? So what would you say to someone, fresh getting in right now?
Well, if the question's really whether you should specialize, I think to a certain extent. Or
should you specialize, right?
You have to. I mean, I don't think that, we'll face it, do I get a retail deal done every now and then? Yeah, but I bring in a partner on it because I don't know anything about it. That's not my area. It's heck, for that matter, Houston's so big. There's even areas of Houston that I'll get as lost. I'm going to bring in a partner and I can do the transaction, but I need help with the market. And so, I think you need to specialize. Sure. I've never been, and I may be a bit of a contrarian here, that I've never been big on specializing in tenant rep versus landlord rep or seller rep versus buyer rep. But there are a lot of people that do, and look, I'm not going to argue with the fact that there are also very successful people that do that. And so, I think it kind of depends on your environment and what you have resource available and how your company's structured. But for the most part, I don't think trying to be a jack of all trades would be very good to try to do in this business when you start talking about asset classes or retail versus industrial versus office versus multifamily and so on and so forth. I think you really, in land even. I think it's not to say you can't dabble in it or get a deal here or there, but I think you need to be pretty focused. I think you'll be better as a member of a team, whether your team is in your office or your team is your office. Like in my case, I've never been I know there's plenty of very successful, even in my own office, I have some very successful teams in my office. I've always been somebody that kind of bounces around and works deals with every broker, but I will say this, it's been years since I did a deal all by myself and did it solely by myself, because I tend to find the person that is specialized or that is what I feel to be the best expert in that, whether it's a market or a sub-market or a product type or anything else. And so I think, you need to know your weaknesses, and you need to know what you like. I like industrial. We get our shoes dirty. I tell you, there's sometimes in August in the middle of Houston, sometimes I wonder why I'm not doing office space and not industrial, but other than that, it's, you need to specialize, I think. And
okay.
Path and go,
They hit us with a follow-up too, like large shop or on your own, or I guess I would say, even to kind of go into that deeper, would you recommend going on your own or start with a shop, or Any particular flag, maybe even from there?
Well, if you're brand new, I think you absolutely need to start with a shop. I mean, whether it's a large
Okay.
shop or a small shop, yeah, I think trying to go on your own in this business. I mean, it's hard even going to a shop and starting, right? I mean, you need to
Yeah.
have. No, I think though, on the other hand, it really depends on who you're dealing with and who's going to mentor you. You need to find a mentor or two or five. I mean, I can tell you, I think I've got about 8, depending on what the
Okay.
subject is and all that. I think you learn from all these different people. There's not, I'm hesitant to say there's one right way or a wrong way to do it. Sometimes I think better if at least for as far as I was, I mean, I learned a little bit here and there from every single broker that I encountered and dealt with, and turned it into my own style, right? And I think that if I was going to pick a shop to go to, I'm going to find a shop that where I relate to the people, where I think that they're willing to be mentors and to take me under the wing while and focus there. I mean, there's the training. A lot of time I am cautious there in that you can have the best training program on earth, but if you're relying entirely on that, you're probably not going to do as good. I mean, there's always stuff that a textbook says that I guess technically is right, but when it's applied into the real world, oftentimes maybe a little bit different. So it's real important that you have people and surround yourself with people and get involved with people that are willing to share that a little bit with you and to kind of teach you their style, plus just to learn by watching and being involved with them. So, like I said, my take, I've always been like, we've gotten pretty big, so it's a lot more difficult. But I used to every year I set my goals, right? And one of my goals every year for the longest time was that I wanted to do a deal with every broker in our office at some point, and I was able to do that, and it was pretty cool because I would learn something new from every broker. And I'll tell you something, even 20 years in the business or 21 years in the business, I will do a deal with a person that's 1 year in the business, and I will pick something up that I didn't know beforehand. And you got to be willing to do that. It's okay. I mean, just because you've been in business longer doesn't mean that you got everything right and that you can't learn from someone else. Now the important lessons, I think probably more important than what to write to do. By all means, you need to write it down and be very aware and definitely learn from mistakes. When you make a mistake, there's no reason to make one twice, right? So make sure you reflect on those. Doing things right, that's important too. But when you make a mistake, those are the ones you need to make note of. And better yet, when you talk to other brokers, you need to find out what mistakes they made, because then you don't have to make it. It's like that light socket. Don't stick your finger in that one; it'll shock you, right? And I think some of the best lessons, hardest lessons, but the best lessons I've learned were mistakes that I made. And I think I heard a phrase one time: "Was it fail forward?" Right? Instead of fall forward, you fail forward. When you fail, just make sure you learn something from it and identify what caused that to happen, and take that lesson and use it, write it down or something, but don't forget it,
Yeah. We had one more question come in before, and then keep on moving. When you bring someone in to assist, how much do you pay them? And I'm sure this can vary probably from deal to deal, but.
Yeah, that's an interesting subject too, and actually it's a really good question, because I think that I've seen it over the course of a career where people sometimes get into a transaction, and at the end of the deal, all of a sudden they want more, or they feel like they deserve more on the deal and everything else. And I really am a big proponent of saying, look, whatever you guys, first off, you need to talk about it up front. Okay, you need to get that out of the way. Do not wait. It's an uncomfortable discussion often. It really is. It can be again, been in the business over 20 years, and I hate that discussion sometimes when it's, hey, we're going to talk about this. And, I always default into 50-50, meaning if there's no discussion on it, it's a 50-50. And if I have two people that are arguing over that at the beginning or at the end, I'm going to tell them, look, well, if there was no discussion and here we are at the end, basically the time to talk about that is not at the end. Do not do that at the very end of the deal. You're just going to have to accept the fact that if you did all the work or 95% of the work and you guys agreed at 50-50, then you need to be willing to do the 50-50. Important part about doing it at the beginning, though, is at least at that point, everyone has the chance to back out and say, well, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to do it if I'm going to get 20%, 30%, whatever it is. But once you make that agreement and you accept it, and by the way, if you're a younger broker, I don't care how senior the person is, talk to them about it at the very beginning and say, hey, I just want to get this out of the way, just so we're all on the same page. What is your expectation of, what do you have in mind? What am I supposed to be making on this deal? And whatever number they give you, first thing you have to do is decide, are you willing to work on this deal for that amount? And if you're not, you got to be willing to walk away from it. Just because it's a deal doesn't mean it's something you have to do. Obviously, when you're newer in the business, you have less stuff to work on. Sometimes it's worth it. You're going to learn, right? And sometimes you just take it because that's what you can get, right? But on the other hand, in addition to determining how much, you also need to say, what are your expectations? What is it that I'm going to do or that you're going to do for whatever percentage you're going to get? So, for example, I may bring a younger person in on a listing. Do I need them on the? No. I mean, there's 18 dozen people in the office I can call and bring in. And I even tell them, I'm like, look, it's okay for you to turn me down. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to come back around with another deal for you. It doesn't mean that I'm not mad at you. But here's what's going to happen. If I bring you in on this and it's the middle of August, I may say, and I'm only half joking here, but I may say, well, you're going to be the first person to tour this thing, when it's 102 degrees outside, and I'm going to bring you in, but this is my expectation. I'm going to expect you to be the first point of person to make the tour. I'm going to expect you to put together an update. I'm going to expect you to make so many cold phone calls per week with this property in mind, and lay those expectations out. If they're not laid out for you, you lay them out and say, okay, just to be clear, these are the things I have in mind. Is there anything else that you need to see on this list? Because when we're down the road here, no matter what kind of work gets done, who's doing that work, as long as I've fulfilled my duties, I think it's, we need to be okay with me making what I'm making, you're making what you're making. And so to answer the question, I know it's long-winded and kind of beat around the bush here, but there really isn't a set amount or deal. It kind of depends on the deal, depends on what involvement I've had in it. For example, if I'm making the decision, prior to that, it was funny. I had a discussion with a young man several years ago, but it was funny. And he wasn't complaining. He was it was funny to me because I kind of pulled it up and I saw it on the database. I took good notes, and he had done a tremendous amount of work on this transaction. The particular transaction, it was a listing that we were on, and there was a space in the building, and he did almost all of it. And I really was pretty happy with him. He didn't try to come in and expect me to cut him in with any more or less, but I felt like I should show him. I said, let me ask you something. What were you doing on March 16th of 2011? 2011. He said, well, I was in junior high. And I said, okay. He said, let me show you something. And I showed him. I said, this is the first time I got involved with this particular client. And I showed him throughout the time in the database how I, on multiple occasions, would go and meet with this person. We had a couple of other deals that didn't make and had all these discussions. And here we were in 2018 getting a deal done. And so I think what dawned on him, and he pointed it out to me, he said, so the reality is, yes, I did a ton of work right now, but the reality is you've been working on this since I was in junior high. So yeah, maybe it wasn't that it was, he may have thought he was doing 95% of the work, but the reality was, no, I was more like I was doing, 80% of it. So you don't get into too much in the way you did this, I did it. Bottom line is you agree to something up front, stick to it. I can tell you, it always works itself out. I notice it if I notice a young man or a young woman is doing a great job, and I don't meddle in the deal. If it's running, I'm like, keep running. I'm not going to get you. It's like if somebody's running with the ball headed to the end zone, what are you going to jump in the way and trip them? I mean, I'm not doing that. Let them go. Score, please. We'll get a check. I noticed that, and what I tend to do is like, well, you did a whole bunch on this, rather than us worry about me taking less or whatever. Sometimes I do, but other times it's like, well, hey, by the way, while you were doing all that, check it out. I got 3 new listings, and I want to bring you in on them. So it all works itself out.
Absolutely.
I think brokers tend to be a little bit. Sometimes get a little bit one-track minded, and they tend to want to focus on what have you done for me lately, or what this deal or that deal, and they don't keep tabs. Just there are certain points when if it's not a relationship that's got some kind of reward to it, as in reciprocity and whatnot, then you just don't work with them as much in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever look back and regret it or have a reservation. Once you're in the deal, commit and make the deal, and it'll work itself out in the long run.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you've taught me, Mike, just in the way you handle leadership, is accountability, and that's really what it comes down to. In understanding just accountability when it comes to those type of situations. And
sure, that I think that is one of the most important components, I think, of not just the brokerage business or any given single relationship, but yeah, accountability is huge, man. And what I mean by that is none of us have time to hear a 6-page dissertation of why it's not your fault, or who you delegate to, who did it, or whatever else. Here's what has to happen. When it's your job, when you're responsible for completing a task, by all means, learn how to delegate. Use whatever resource you have. Call who you have to call. But at the end of the day, when that task is not done, or if it's done incorrectly, it's your fault. And you got to say that. And trust me, there's many times, and it happens all the time. Try to keep it down to a minimum. But when it happens, and believe me, I'll sit there and look at the phone thinking, man, I don't want to make this phone call. I do not want to call this person and tell them how I messed up. But we're human beings. We make mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes, right? Now, let's try not to keep them or make them habitual. They don't make the same mistake over and over, like I was saying earlier, but you got to be willing to say it and own up to it. And that's, at the same time, we have to hold each other accountable, meaning if I'm going to ask you to do something, or I'm having expectations for you, you have the right to have the same expectations for me, or at least expect me to withhold my part of the bargain and part of my part of the deal, whatever my responsibility was. You got to look at it this way. If my client gets a contract that's messed up, okay, they don't care that my assistant or my staff member who typed it up made that error. They don't care because it came from me. It came from my desk. And therefore, the only person that can take responsibility with regards to that relationship with that client is me. I have to say it. I have to say, I screwed that up. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Correct the mistake and move on. Conversely, if you're on the other end of that, if you're the person that's someone's being accountable to you and telling you where there was a mess up or whatever, you have to let it go. You got to move on. I mean, why is it that you're going to continue to harp on something when they've just acknowledged that they made a mistake? And when you have a relationship like that and you both are able to hold each other accountable, when that occurs, I think that's when you really are going to reach a different level in success. You're going to reach a different level with the relationships that you have. You're going to have a lot more integrity. People realize that it takes a lot of courage, a lot more courage to step up and admit when you're wrong or when you made the mistake than it does to the other way around. You know what I'm saying? A tremendous amount. And yet it also builds a certain level of respect. Again, caveat being, you do it over and over and over, that's a different problem and a different issue and totally different discussion here. But correct them and move on. And not just that, but be willing. It's not just about mistakes. It's also about expectations. It's about responsibilities. And when you make a commitment and say, this is what I'm committing to doing, you need to step up and do it. When you say you're going to do something, you need to step up and do it. And that includes when you're at a property tour and someone says, ask you a question, you got to tell them. You don't know the answer to it, you got to tell them that. Don't come up with a whole explanation that beats around the bush and doesn't give them an answer. You need to give them the answer. I don't know, but I'm going to get right back to you. By gosh, when you say that, when you say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you, write that down, do what you have to do. But whatever you do, when you get back to that desk, you need to get that answer to them and make sure they know it. And you do that, and it builds a tremendous amount of respect. It really fosters a strong relationship. It gets you the benefit of the doubt when needed. And there's nothing like having the benefit of the doubt. And it'll really establish the integrity that we all want to have and should have with our clients.
Yeah, well, Matt and I have worked on significant amount of projects over the years, and it's never my fault. I can tell you that much. That's probably
That's different,
I haven't earned any respect from him. Oh, we're gonna say something.
Steve always takes me down that double black diamond and says, "Hey, this is the best route to go," and he knows my skill level. So that goes right into the office world too.
I don't like taking down a black diamond, but hopefully that doesn't translate into the workplace. Just so we can move along, because we do have a lot of questions coming in. Matt said as well, but transitioning to like more of a, I guess going back, we touched upon oil and gas and maybe just getting into the real estate a little bit. For what you're seeing in Houston as being the energy capital of the world, I mean, yeah, what's your prediction maybe on a rebound or like certain property types? What do you think are going to be impacted the most? Like upstream companies versus downstream companies. Like what's your whole take on that as we have about 20 minutes left, Matt, so it's
time flies. Well, I think oil and gas, we'll call it the energy business, really. Okay. I mean, it's interesting. On a side note, I actually read something the other day, and it's finally coming around, is that when you think about who's the best equipped group, who are the best companies out there to lead us into this alternative energy green revolution, I'm going to give you a hint. It's the energy companies. It's the same people. They're in the business of energy. They're going to be the best ones to figure all this out. And they're doing it. They're actually doing it. And we're actually seeing that in Houston. There's a lot of these green energy or, sustainable energy companies that are popping up. And most of them are seeded or even owned by the current energy companies, because that's what they do. They're really good at it. And they're going to figure it out before anybody will. And they're best equipped to do it. But on that note, when you watch oil prices, and it was funny, we saw this in 2014. First off, let me back up. You want to talk about asset classes that are impacted the most. It's interesting because, even 15 years in the business, I was sitting here looking at it going, man, I always, for whatever reason, would associate the oil and gas or the energy business with warehouses, right? But in Houston in particular, it is much more heavily impacting the office industry office sector than it does the industrial sector. Industrial sector has a ton of other components to it. We've got the e-commerce wave and the boom, and despite all that, Amazon's still not going to save the world, but it's been a heck of a tailwind for us and really helped. It's a great media piece too, and it really helped investors something too. But we've got that sector. We've got probably the thing that I thought was the most interesting or most really a lot of people don't realize is when 2014 happened, the energy downturn occurred. The media kind of screwed it up, surprise, and they were talking about the energy downturn, but what they should have been saying all along was that the upstream energy business that was suffering. So that's your companies that, simplify it, go punch a hole in the ground and pull oil out of it and gas out of it, right? Yeah. But what was happening in Houston, in another way, is Houston's very spread out. And actually, we're the biggest city in the U.S. land area-wise, by a lot. A lot of people don't realize. You look at California is number 2, and they have 502 square miles. You have Philadelphia is number 5, and they've got about 145 square miles. Houston's 672 square miles. Okay, that's a big city. Now, what does that mean? Well, it lends us to being very, very sub-market oriented. So what's working over here doesn't necessarily mean what's working over here is working or not. So when the market's bad over here, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad over there. And what we saw in 2014 is when the energy downturn occurred, the upstream companies were really suffering. And so the north and northwest submarkets, for example, which had been the darling of Houston's industrial real estate sector for the last decade and a half, 15 years, really was hurting. There was space everywhere. A lot of these crane-served manufacturing buildings were sitting out there. There was a ton of them out there. And it was crazy. I remember I had this 400,000-foot, 15-year lease with a multi-billion-dollar tenant. You'd think, hey, that in a market, and also there was a bloodbath occurring in north and northwest Houston, not only in the crane-served manufacturing, but also in distribution. It got a little bit overbuilt. You'd have thought, I should be getting picked up on a helicopter or driven around a limo and, this and that. And yet, no. 48 hours before that lease got signed, we were in second position. We were told to stand in line. It was because I was dealing with a plastics company, and those guys, it's a downstream part. They're part of the downstream world. And that was the east side of Houston near a port where all the downstream companies were. And despite the fact that they could have gone North Houston and had 30 choices, or Northwest Houston had another 20 choices, no, they needed to be on the east side of Houston. They needed a certain type of rail, and there was limited supply at that point. And so it was crazy. You were literally witnessing a bloodbath in one area and yet a boom going on the other side of town. Because when you think about the economics here, and your feedstock, that's what you use to make your doohickey or a product, right? When your feedstock is oil or gas and the price goes to a tenth of what it was, well, your margins get really good. And so you're selling the widget or whatever for one price, and you're now making it for 20% of what you were making it for last month. Okay, so yeah, those guys were killing it. Okay, so when you see these kind of things happen, unfortunately for us, you talk to a lot of the old dogs, and they talk about the 80s and how hard the 80s was for Houston because of the energy crisis that was occurring then and the way real estate world worked. And yeah, it was tough, but Houston's become a lot more diverse since then. And we have a very strong downstream energy sector. Our plastics, the Port of Houston, we're an exporting port, so we're sending all that stuff out. And then on top of that, we have we have the largest chemical complex in the entire U.S. or actually in this hemisphere. It's the second largest in the world. And that's your refineries. That's going to be your chemical companies. Think about it these days with COVID-19. I mean, there's chemicals getting made out there that are used to sanitize things. Plastic itself is a very sanitary product. There's a lot of good stuff going on the east side of Houston. Meanwhile, go northwest, and it's tough. I mean, and there's a lot of difficulty or challenges that we're facing up there in those submarkets. So the oil world, Houston's always been very reliant on it. It is definitely our economic base employment. But fortunately, since the 80s, we got a lot smarter. We became more diverse. Never mind, I didn't even talk about the medical center and a lot of the other stuff Houston's going on. But the economy's become more diverse. It's helped us and really helped us sustain this stuff. Yet it's always oils and gas. It's going to always be something that really makes us, keeps us afloat when sometimes, let me tell you, I mean, when the Great Recession happened, okay, this was interesting. We weren't getting rich. We were all whining about it. But if you actually looked at the numbers, Houston actually had a very slight above the zero line, a positive growth that occurred. Everybody else in the U.S. was dying on the vine. And yet here in Houston, because oil was at $126 a barrel, we kind of sat it out. Everybody else was in the middle of it. We sat it out. Unfortunately, this time around, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I mean, we're getting a double hit there, and but at the same time, I think we're going to be able to, like always, we're going to ski the slope. We're going to get there, and with the energy downturn of 2014 too, I think a lot of these companies went down and cut their budgets to the bone. They got smarter. They brought a lot of rigs offline that were outdated and weren't efficient, replaced it with much better technology. I mean, today, part of the problem is our own doing, in that we became much more efficient with how we basically get the oil out of the ground. We can get 3 times as much oil out of the ground than we used to. In other words, we can use what we can do with 1 rig today used to take 3 rigs as little as 10 years ago. And it's changing everything. So we used to watch the rig count. Baker Hughes puts out a report, and we'd watch the rig count like clockwork. We paid closer attention to it than we did the actual price of oil. And that one's kind of changing because that rig count doesn't have as much importance. It's important, but it's not the same. And so I think as things continue to unfold here, and we start our recovery, and believe it or not, I think a lot of people don't realize this too, that we're technically already starting a recovery. Now it's going to I think a lot's going to depend on how these COVID cases, if we have much of a spike and we have to go back to quarantine, I think a lot's going to depend. That's really going to probably be a big factor, because ultimately, for oil prices to change, demand has to go up. We have to get back to driving and using the amount of oil we're using, and we have to clear out those storage facilities. Now, the second part, supply needs to be reduced, and I think that's happening. A lot of these companies have capped these wells, they've shut them down. Those aren't things that you can just hit a switch and turn them back on. And so as demand goes up, supply starts, being reduced. There's a chance, I think oil I think it's going to probably stay pretty constant for at least the near term and at least the next year or so. But I think we can probably start seeing it start increasing and climbing again once this kind of glut we get rid of it. So.
Yeah, that's a great transition to, just like you said, getting creative in how you're getting. How's Mike getting deals done right now, or what do you see? What are you doing differently based on all those kind of economic factors, especially where you're at in Houston? What are you doing to help get deals across the finish line, and how do you see that happening?
You definitely have to be creative. I think it's funny there's different components and different things as a broker that we like to that are important, right? There's integrity, there's being a market expert, understanding the market, there's being persistent, and those are all very important traits, and often we rely on them. But there's another trait that you need to have, and if not, you need to, I don't know how you learn. I guess you have to learn it, right? But and that's through educating yourself and really exposing yourself. But there's a real need to be creative. I go back to the Great Recession again. Again, we had positive growth, but it was very, very small, and we were whining about it, and we didn't really understand what everybody else was going through. But we did. It hurt still. And one of the things we did back then that I thought was interesting is we had a problem, right? We have to understand the problem. What is the problem? What is our obstacle? And what we found was that, yeah, even though you could have been the best, performer as far as your notes and loans and things were, you could always pay your bills, and yet you weren't getting a loan. You weren't going to get a loan to get to do a spec project. It was even hard to get a loan to do a regular deal, even if you're a user. You could get them, but it was difficult. And what you found is you go to the banks, and the banks would be, if you walked into a bank, asked for a loan, not only would they probably tell you no, but they'd try to talk you out of it. They'd say, oh, yeah, you really don't want to do that right now. Because think about it, their mindset was, we're not loaning money, so it must be bad, right? So we don't think you should buy it. We think you should wait, right? And so what we thought, I would tell my owners that you got to be careful, because I had to make sure the owners, this was important, that they had to either have been able to work something out with their bank, in the form of like a wrap loan or something, or they had to, if they owned it free and clear. But I would tell them, I'm like, hey, let's not just offer owner financing, because that was a suggestion. People say, well, maybe you should offer owner financing because that'll help get the deal, because they can't get their loan at the bank. Instead, we took a different approach. We said, no, don't offer it, encourage it. In other words, we would tell people, no, don't go to the bank. Don't even bother. You're wasting your time. They're not going to tell you what you want to hear. We want to do the financing. And if you did that, with a 3-year balloon or whatever, like, hey, let the financial market thaw out, okay? And this will give you some time, get moved into the facility, and we show them all the other cool magical numbers you can run and all this. And then we would say, all right, you do that, and we'll close this thing. And then I would go to I'd talk to the seller here, and I'd say, look, you need to look at this kind of like a lease with a giant deposit, because if you're willing to lease the building, because that was your alternative, you might as well try this, because that way you get a much bigger deposit. You don't have to go through the same thing, eviction versus foreclosing on it. If you structure it right, it's not a whole heck of a lot different, and therefore go that route. And it encouraged it. And it was a while. It was funny. We'd read the paper, and I always put the transactions in the column. It was like TNRG was doing these deals every week, and we were like, there wasn't a whole lot of other sales deals getting done. It was because we don't even want you to go to the bank. We got this. We'll do it. And it worked. You got to think that way. Again, here was the difference. What we looked at is a lot of people on a normal basis would say we should offer owner financing. We took a different turn. We said, no, we're going to encourage it. We're going to ask them to do it. We're going to tell them we prefer that, and make it worth their while to do it. And because that way it just took out the problem right away. This obviously is a different situation. It's less of a liquidity. It's more of a cash flow situation. For example, I think going into it and saying, I think we need to be better, and I'm going to talk about it later today in my thing at 3:00 today that I do. We're going to talk about sale leasebacks. I think you need to be better versed on that. Learn how to do these things, because I'm telling you, there's a heck of an opportunity. You have companies that are going to survive this thing. Hell or high water, they're going to make it. All right. The question is, as with any downturn, right? And I would actually even compare this to the younger broker, is that you can ride a wave up, and there's nothing like getting in at the bottom and riding it up to the top versus jumping into the top when you don't know what's going on anyway, and you're missing out on stuff that you don't know you're missing, right? This way, you're going to ride the wave up. So these companies, the same way, they're going to get into this, and they need cash to do that. They're going to need cash to ramp up when things start getting better, and to get ahead of it, and to succeed, and to really, like I said, there are going to be companies on this deal that go out of business. There's going to be companies that hang on for dear life and come out of it okay. But then there's going to be other companies. There's going to be a lot of them that are not only going to come out of it okay, they're going to blow up. They're going to do extremely well. And those are the ones that are going to find means to expand and be geared up and ready for.
Bear with this. I think we're good. We had an internet connection issue, but we're back. We're back. You're all good.
Oh man, so I was talking all along and nobody.
No, you were good. It was honestly.
Okay. No, they're going to have to ride that way back up, and if you can get them the cash, and one way to do it is talk to them about owner finance, or not about a sale leaseback, and may not be what they want to do, but if it's a situation where, hey, we get it, you're going to make this, but are you going to have the cash you need to jump on that wave and really hit it out of the park? And one way to do it is if there's investors, believe it or not, they're still investors. They're looking at stock market's gotten better, but they've been looking at the stock market. They've been looking at these other things. There's really not good. Real estate's still a pretty sound investment here, and interest rates are at all-time lows. And if they can get in there, and so there's plenty of investors that still want to buy. Now, I mean, it depends on who you're talking to, but I haven't seen cap rates move yet. I know probably some people would argue a different way, and I guess it depends on your asset. It does depend on your asset class, but I think there's an opportunity for you to really get in there and position the right client, the right tenant/seller right now, and allow them the kind of cash and that they are going to need to really ramp up and really make a home run out of this on the recovery. And it's through selling that building. They get to lock in their lease for a period, and the rest is history. So as brokers, we need to learn that better, and you need to be positioned and be ready to talk about it and encourage it, I think, in some cases. Other creative stuff, I can go on and on and on, but I think it's just, there's going to be credit. And I guess I'm going to be cautious, because using the term credit, I guess it doesn't necessarily mean, you can have a company with great credit that doesn't have good cash flow. And I think you see this in a lot of downturns too, where, when we typically review financials, really you're looking at, you ever notice they don't ever ask for 1 year. And the reason being is 1 year doesn't tell you much. You have to look at 2 or 3 years. And if you ever look at somebody's financials and you see year to year to year, they keep going down, there's a problem. They're going out of business technically, right? Even if it's a lot of money sitting there and they're still doing great money-wise, they're going out of business if their income goes down over 3 years. Well, show me any company right now. I mean, there's a few I know, but there's not many companies right now that you can take last year's financials and compare it to this year and it looks better this year, okay? Yeah. So you got to get around that. And so there's going to be some things you're going to have to do to mitigate credit issue, or let's say credit, but concerns landlords may have about credit. And some of that, I mean, it could be as simple as pushing free rent versus a lower rate, or I'm sorry, free rent versus having the landlord that doesn't want to spend a lot of TI, and the tenant pays for the TI. And if you think about it, I mean, I invest in real estate too, and I've looked at, I remember a deal that I was looking at, and this tenant was pushing for this extra month of free rent, or they wanted us to pay for some extra improvements. And, their rent was around $50,000 in a month. And I had, at the moment, had an interest only loan, right? That was going to go on for another, I think I had about 7 or 8 months left. And so when I looked at that, my interest was only, I think it was costing me $9,000 a month, right? And so I looked at it and said, well, heck, if I give them a free month of rent, that's like, I'm giving that to them, it's $50,000. They love that. To me, it cost me $9,000. So I might as well do that versus writing a check for $50,000 and putting an improvement in the building when I have a tenant that maybe they weren't bad credit, but they weren't, I was a little concerned about spending that kind of money, and it works itself out. That's a very simple and more common type deal, but you really, I think it all comes down to really identifying what the problem or the obstacle is, kind of taking a step back, try to look at it from everybody's side and understand where everybody's coming from, tempering people's expectations, and then putting it together and going with it. I would say any young broker or old broker, I mean, just because you're younger and newer doesn't mean you're not an expert, doesn't mean that you can't have a good idea, and it darn sure doesn't mean that you shouldn't speak up when you have one. And just try to think it through first. And you'd be surprised. There's a lot of deals get made when 10 minutes ago, I had no clue what was going on here and what I was going to tell them to do. And I thought of it right then, because I went, oh, and it's all about understanding the problem. So once you understand the problem, you can figure it out. So.
Okay. I think Matt has another question coming in. I do want you to just touch base briefly before we wrap, because we're at the top of the hour now, Mike, but, and we want you to give you another break, because we know you're hosting another call here in a couple hours, but you were born for this. But why don't you start first? But yeah, then we'll move to compassionately, because I thought that was awesome. And I think especially given the times, we want to know if there's anything that we can do or advice on how to establish things like that. We've done, volunteer work and Habitat for Humanity here as a company, but I think that was amazing. So I want to, finish with that. But Matt, did you have a question that you wanted to ask first?
Yeah, we had a question that came in, and I think it's kind of back to the newer brokers there. Which specialization route would be best experienced from a 20-year residential broker moving on to full-time commercial? So in my opinion, maybe multifamily, but I could be wrong about that. So yeah, I figure maybe one quick answer there before we get into the next.
You want topic. A quick answer from me, huh? Okay. I don't know. That's gonna be that's challenging. No,
outside your comfort zone.
I think it varies. I mean, I'd ask. I mean, sometimes you have to sit down. I do a lot of brainstorming. I use paper a lot and I have to throw it away. But you didn't take notes. But I mean, who do you know? I mean, first off, I'd write down everybody that you know that owns a business. Well, where are they located and what kind of building are they in? Two, what do you like to do? I mean, try to learn a little bit about the product types and realize, do I want to be out in the middle of August in a dirty pipe yard or crane serve building or whatever, that in some cases in these metal buildings, it's 15 degrees hotter in the darn building than it is outside. So on the other hand, I enjoy that. I kind of like that. Or you want to get into the office, the air conditioned office space that doesn't get your shoes dirty. I don't know. I'm talking smack, but no, I always joke. I'm like, these office guys, they don't get their shoes dirty and they sit in the air conditioning. Why don't they make more money than us? But no, I joke. But you got to determine, what do you like? I mean, because I think your experience in residential can be very, very valuable. I think that I'll tell you, in residential, I think a lot of times you end up having, I don't know, sometimes commercial brokers can be a bit snooty about that, right? And yet, I can tell you, I've done some of the best deals with residential agents that got involved in. But I think, well, in one respect, you're having a leg up, because if you want to know, if anybody wants to know what the commercial real estate world's going to be doing as far as technology goes, they want to know what they're going to be doing in 5 years. Go look at what the residential market's doing today, because we're 5 years behind them. And so you get a leg up. You got to use the technology. It's the truth. I mean, we are so far behind them on the
For
technology.
sure.
You go back and look. It's pretty accurate. What they were doing 5 years ago, we're doing it today. And so, but I would really focus on the product type that I really enjoy, because I really don't know that what you've been doing in the residential world is that any one of the other items is going to make you better in any of the other ones. I would be more who are your contacts. If you obviously the residential, you're going to see more sales, and so probably be more on the industrial, I would think, because I think you see a little bit more sales, but not a ton. I wouldn't say it's not that impactful, but it could be. Maybe some investment deals. What's your experience level there? And I really would just focus more there. I don't know that there's one route to go or another, on where you're better suited if you're coming out of the residential world. So hopefully that answered. That was kind of short.
No, I think that was good.
Yeah, it was kind of long too, but whatever.
No, that was great, Mike. So last question before, or not even a question, just before we wrap up here for today. And thank you to the audience, everyone nationwide, and maybe even globally. I'm not sure. Hopefully, but
we're going global.
We're trying to. Compassionately. So just, obviously the idea is to give back to the community and just, you establish this foundation, or, is an idea that you helped create. Tell us a little bit more about that and what it means for Lee & Associates and kind of what's all involved with that.
Well, it started, I'll tell you, it was, we had just joined Lee, I don't know, maybe been in the business. I think it'd been there 2 years, maybe, give or take, maybe 2 or 3. We just joined, and Hurricane Harvey hit. And, that was a tough time for the whole city of Houston. I like to tell people, I mean, it was, from my perspective, and I know many of us, but from my perspective, it was the most devastating thing physically that I had seen firsthand, had witnessed firsthand in my entire life. Yet at the exact same time that it was devastating, it was also the most inspiring thing I'd seen in my entire life firsthand. And it was the whole city came out of the woodworks and helped one another. But what also happened, I was getting blown up, phone calls, emails, text messages across the Lee network. People wanted to know, are you okay? It was kind of funny too, because at the very beginning I was like, this isn't even a real hurricane. It's nothing. And then it kept raining, and it got really bad. But this wasn't a typical hurricane, but people wanted to know. And I was literally behind. I couldn't keep up with them. I was almost stressed out just trying to keep up with people's phone calls. But they were wanting to give us money. And I'd say, well, hold on a second. I need to get my hands around what's happening, because I don't know what we need yet. And if you want to write a check, a Red Cross, FEMA, do it. But if you want to help us, just hang on. And I was still having trouble gauging it, and I was trying to get it worked out where I could figure out what we did need. And then all of a sudden, they announced they were going to open the floodgates, if you recall, because the dams and the reservoirs were overloaded, and that meant that several people in our office were going to be underwater. At that point, I made a phone call to Jeff Rinkov, who we're extremely blessed to have him on board at the helm. A phenomenal leader, very difficult job, and he does it with, like a master. And I'll tell you, within 48 hours, the people across Lee and Associates raised over $100,000. And
Wow.
it's funny too, because I deal with these people and they're awesome. I love the people at Lee across the network, and you talk to these guys, they'll fight over a $2 per broker fee increase, right? They will fight tooth and nail over this. And it's amazing. I mean, they literally will go to war over it. And yet, if you need it, they will, without question, hand you the shirt off their back and come. And we saw that across the board. I guess it's kind of how we're wired. We're going to fight over things, or we're going to fight for that nickel, right? Yet when somebody needs it, people did it. And it was extremely generous. Yet what happened, all this money comes in and they're ready to give us to us. And I said, whoa, hold on a second. As much as we needed it, I looked at it and went, no, I don't think we need to put that in our operating account. That could be a tax problem and it makes things difficult. And so we tried to figure that out. And then on top of that, I said, wait a minute, I would feel better, because once we had a separate account set up at this point, they were getting ready to put it all in there. I said, hold on a second. Why don't we set some standards? I saw a precedent or I knew we were setting a precedent because people were so generous and willing to do it. I went, let's get it right. And we'll weather the storm for the time being while we, get this figured out. And I said, I think we'd rather submit a draw almost. And that way I can show you what we're needing the money for, what we're going to spend it on. That way no one's like going, hey, Mike's got this new Ferrari. Do you use our money for that? I don't have a Ferrari. But you know what I'm saying? I didn't want any doubt there. And I wanted to be transparent. I just felt that was something we were kind of learning as we go. And that was something that ultimately would set the bar for future. And there's going to be future disasters, whether it's Houston or Florida or wildfires in California or whatever, or COVID or whatever else. And so I knew we did it. So we got through it. Everything got worked out. And, they were so generous. People helped us out so much. And it also made me realize that wouldn't it be cool to have an organization that throughout the year that people could donate to, even if in lieu of a disaster, and you get the tax benefit. Because, you're going to be generous. At least you get, you're doing it for the right reasons. They gave us some money without tax benefits, right? But let's set something up so they can get the benefit and we can encourage it. And then we can actually help people of all walks, whether it be a disaster. It doesn't have to be somebody with Lee and Associates. We have an application. You go to our website at lee-associates.com, and there's a section for Compassionate Lee. It's a very short one-page little application. You fill it out, whatever the need, tell us what you need money-wise, and as a board, we vote on it. And it's become a very big success. But the interesting part about it, too, is it's not just about money. It's not just about raising money. It provides a mechanism, but it's also been a brand that we've used as we do community service projects. It's amazing. Again, you have such generous people. And it's not just Lee. There's a lot of really good people out there that, you get out, whether you're doing Habitat for Humanity or going to a hospital or an old folks home or whatever, and we do the T-shirts, and we named it Compassionate Lee. You get it. The play on
That's
words.
good.
And it's been a really. I want to see it grow more, and it will. I think it really got off to a great start. We've been able to help so far. I think we've helped about 12. I think I got that right. I think 12 different individuals, whether it be people that are suffering from an illness, them or a family member. We've helped the wildfire situation. We've made some donations to the homeless up in Minneapolis. We've helped meals for the older people that can't get out and get the meal during this COVID situation. We helped with Houston. We had the local in our general area, the school district had a pretty big deficit on the free lunch program, and so we had to cover the balance. We also went out to local businesses, and that provided them with the means they could make the donation to Compassionate Lee, who then made the donation to it. So it's been a great mechanism. I want to grow it more and build it more, and we're going to. But it's really something that I think, look, as brokers, for one, it is difficult to really get over the mindset that, we don't know, we're straight commission. We don't know when our next paycheck's coming. So it doesn't matter if I made a whole bunch of money right now. I may not make any more later, but I can tell everybody, and I would encourage everybody, if you make a donation, whether it be Compassionately or any other organization, you'll never need that money. I promise you, you never will. You got to do it for the right reasons. Okay. You got to do it without worrying about and expecting anything in return. But I can promise you, no matter what, it always works out for you. Not only do you not need the money, but I'm not kidding. It'll be every donation I've ever made. I mean, it seems like some listing that I didn't really think was going to sell ends up going under contract, right? And I'm not even making this up. I can show you probably 10 examples of this, but you have to get through that. And I think that those that make it and do well in this business can do very well financially, but you can't forget where it came from. And I think giving back and being willing to take that leap of faith there and just write that check. I promise you that the people that you're giving it to need it way more than you do. And your money can go so much further for them than it's going to go for you. I mean, and do it. I mean, get out there and do it. And compassion has been a great component there, and it's a thing to get behind. It's the T-shirts and you get out and do the service project together. And I think that anytime you go, right now we're in the middle of the worst economic downturn we've seen since the Depression, and there are people that really need the money right now, and they need time, and they need your help. And whether it's a disaster or someone that really is going through a difficult financial situation, maybe they were impacted by COVID and that they were sick. Any number of things have happened. People lost their jobs. And so, despite what concerns you may have, when you find success, I think it's important more than ever that we, as brokers, as human beings, kind of try to find a way to dig deep a little bit and maybe do without the $7 or $9 coffee at Starbucks for a week or two and give that money to somebody that genuinely needs it. And I would encourage everybody to do that. So,
awesome.
That's great.
I think you're officially the JJ Watt of commercial brokerage, and your contributions to certain relief efforts. I think that's amazing. That's awesome. I know I've learned a lot from you, not only from leadership, but things like this. And I thank you for sharing that for everybody that joined today. I think we're all set for today, Matt and Mike. You personally, thanks for joining. It's always a pleasure to talk. I know I'll be in touch with you soon. But Matt, is there anything else that we need to cover today, or anything? I think we're all.
No, we're good. Thanks so much, Mike. I mean, this is great. We had I set a poll out, and everyone said that the topic, we had 100% that this week's topic was beneficial. So we appreciate all the knowledge, man. That's for sure.
I do want to say something, if I can. One last thing is, guys, and those that are listening, I think what you guys are doing, and I'm not saying this just because you invited me to come on the show and all that, I genuinely think you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I think doing webinars like this and being educational to everybody, I think you guys, through this whole COVID crisis, have clearly come out, and I'm not going to name any names, but I think you're so much more, your level of character and integrity and how you've dealt with your customers and clients is unbelievably different and better and much more legit than maybe a rather large competitor of yours that's out there, and how they dealt with their people. And it really says a lot. And I will say the program, I didn't say it enough on the call, time flies, but guys, y'all are killing it. I love it. I love using it. I think the platform's awesome. I'm finding the information to be extremely helpful and useful. I think what you guys, really, I mean, I'm getting, and this is the honest truth, I can show this to anybody, I can prove it up. And I'm not saying it, you guys didn't ask me to say this. I am getting, when you talk about leads coming in, we are getting legitimate deals. We have done, I was trying to get around the office. I think I told you I'm quarantined right now, but for a while. But I was working on this at the time, but I actually, I didn't even get halfway around my office, but in just the last year alone, we have actually, and when I say leads, I mean, okay, so you have a listing and there's a lead comes in, well, the listing sells. And so you still have this list of people. Okay, so it's to the quality of those lead reports. We counted up 11 deals. Okay, and I didn't even get to half of my office because I had to go home. But 11 deals in the last, it wasn't even 12 months. I think it was the last 9 months that have come from those leads. And there is no other service out there. Again, we won't name names, but certain competitors out there that you get the leads from that I have not got that many deals ever. And they're legit. They're actually, I think there's probably, just me personally, I have 3 more right now that came off of those lead sheets. We haven't done a deal yet, but I'm very confident we'll make one. So guys, if you haven't used it, really get in there and learn those lead reports. The listener, I'm talking to the listeners, get out there and learn those lead reports. They're legit leads, guys. They're better than even a sign call. So don't waste that
Love
stuff.
that.
That's good stuff. So anyway, They didn't ask me to say this either. I'm telling the truth.
No,
Thank you, Mike.
thanks so much, Mike.
Use the follow-up techniques. I think the way they're designed to be used. So I thank you very much for saying that. That means a lot to us. And we'll let everyone go all about their day today. But Mike, thanks for joining us. And Matt, anything else you want to add? But I think.
Oh, thanks so much, Mike. This was great, man. We had another person just say this is absolutely amazing. Thank you. So this is good stuff, man.
Perfect.
You're the man, Mike. We appreciate you, sir.
Well, I'm here if anybody ever needs input. I'm not shy about giving my opinion, so feel free to call me. My number, you can go to my website, you'll find me. So, and thanks for having me on, the guys. It's been fun. So
it's been great, Mike.
Absolutely.